Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm Jessica Thomas. I want to thank Viatris for their support of today's program and of the mental wellness chat. They've been a supporter now for a good amount of time. And I always like to say thank you to MS Views and News for their ideation of having this MS mental wellness chat because it's been quite a community for people. And I go back and I look at the videos because they're recorded. And sometimes here recently, I actually went to the YouTube channel to look, and I just was pleasantly surprised, but happy to see that a lot of people continue to watch these sessions after they've been recorded as well. So, what we're going to talk about today is self-compassion. And so, we're going to talk about kind of how to become your inner ally for better health with MS. And we're going to explore how self-compassion can be your strength. We're often too much easily able to be the critic, but we're going to talk about being compassionate. And so, what is self-compassion? So, self-compassion is treating yourself with the same kindness that you'd offer a friend, and involves being mindful, being kind, and having a sense of common humanity for you. We'll move to our next slide, and we'll talk about why is this important for MS? Why does it even matter? Well, with MS or any other chronic disease, that disease can bring unique physical and emotional challenges. And self-compassion supports resilience, it can reduce anxiety, and enhances well-being. So I'm going to go back to, let me pull the questions over here for a second. For Shelley. So Shelley, who is here today, so this is one of the reasons why it matters, is because we have days where things happen, like sometimes we fall, or we have extraordinary fatigue, or we might have symptoms that appear, and we can either get stuck in the hard, difficult part, or we can work with our feelings and also be really compassionate to ourselves as we would a friend. So I'm so like, you're my gratitude for being here tonight, because I think that this will be helpful for you too. So we're going to talk about the three elements of self-compassion. We'll move on to the next slide. So the first one is mindfulness. This is acknowledging your pain without judgment. Self-kindness, speaking to yourself with warmth. And then the common humanity, recognizing that you're not alone in the struggle. So I want to ask you, and we don't have a question box, so we can leave the slide here. What does self-compassion mean to you? What words, we can do this in the question box and I'll read them, but like, what words come to mind when I say self-compassion? For example, when I say self-compassion, I think of giving myself grace. That's kind of the word that comes to me, is having grace. I also, feelings that I associate with self-compassion are sometimes it's challenging, sometimes because you have to think a little bit differently, but sometimes it feels gentle, which is nice. Okay, so we have Sherry said acceptance. Terry said non-judgment. Barbara said kindness and caring. So have you ever experienced a moment where you offered kindness to yourself instead of judgment? Have you ever had an experience where you could have been kind of like curt with yourself or judgmental, but instead you just gave yourself grace? I will give an example. So let me think of something real quick. I have lots of examples because I'm human, just like we all are. But I know one time I was driving to my son's baseball game. I think many of you can identify with this. And I went to the wrong county, like not only the wrong school, the wrong county. And granted, my GPS took me there, and I can blame it on that. But it was definitely a cognitive moment for me, because I should have realized at some point that I was going out of the county for the game, and it was a bit out of the way. But what I did instead of getting frustrated, I just recognized that I had had a tired day, a long day, and I saw it as an opportunity to listen to some good music while I got to the right game, and later allowed it to be a funny story. But there was an opportunity that I could have been mean, like, oh, you just don't get it right. You couldn't put the address in right, or I could have criticized myself, but I didn't. Okay, so we have Maria that says self-compassion for me is putting the past behind me and recognizing how I've risen above my difficulties. Very good, very good. So we're going to move on to our next slide. And we're going to talk about self-compassion versus self-esteem. So what is the difference between the two? So self-compassion is about, or self-esteem is about evaluating yourself. And self-compassion is about accepting yourself. So there's a difference. So unlike self-esteem, self-compassion isn't shaken by failure or comparison. So let's say that one more time. So self-esteem is about how you evaluate yourself, and self-compassion is how you accept yourself. And so self-esteem is about, can also be like how we criticize ourselves, whereas self-compassion is about how we're going to accept who we are no matter what. Now, there's some common misconceptions about self-compassion. So we'll move on to our next slide. And we're going to talk about the first myth. The first myth is self-compassion is self-pity. It is not one bit. It is not erasing a reality of something. It is not feeling bad for yourself. Or I have a good friend that will say, poor bunnies. It's an expression I had never heard before, but it's not about self-pity at all. It's a powerful source of strength and clarity. So when you are self-compassionate, you are giving yourself and putting yourself in a place of power. And it doesn't make you weak or complacent when you practice self-compassion. It motivates you with care and not criticism. So there's something really powerful about self-compassion. Now, I want to ask you in the question box, and actually I have another thing to read. Maria says, self-esteem for me is seeing myself as a together person that moves about her life, even in bad situations that occur. Very good, very good. So I'd like to ask you guys another question. Are you able to recognize your inner critic? Think of a moment recently where you were hard on yourself. What did your inner critic say? And then I want you to think about, how could you have responded with self-compassion? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for one person to give me an example. So what is something that you have done recently, a moment where you maybe you were hard on yourself? And what did your inner critic say? And then as a group, we're going to talk about some ways that we can modify. And if I don't get anything, what I'll do is I'll give us an example in a second if I don't have anything. But I don't always want to use Jessica examples because I feel like I don't want to steal the show. I know that we're hard on ourselves sometimes. So I know we all probably have an example. Maria says, strong inner critic, not easy to quiet, just breathe it away. Absolutely. So and we'll talk a little bit more about strategies, things that we can do to quiet that inner critic. But so I'll give you an example. Okay, no, this is one. Thank you, Barbara. Barbara gave us an example. Here you go again, always dropping things. So, with MS, sometimes we don't have the same dexterity that we've had before in the past, or we might have trouble holding things. I know sometimes when I'm tired, I can drop things very easily, and it's kind of frustrating. What is something that you can tell yourself to hush that critic, that inner critic that says, "Here you go again, always dropping things." Barbara says that she says, "It's okay." I know in that situation that I tell myself, sometimes I drop things when I'm tired and I move on. Or I might say, my hands are kind of droppy today. Might drop. Or Kevin gives us another example. Why are you always late to everything? Why are you late for everything? So, what is something compassionate that you could say to yourself for that, to shut down that critic? I like the idea of you worked really hard to get here. Amelia says, I've learned to do better. So as you can see, we often have an inner critic. We all do, and we have to learn to quiet it sometimes. And so I'm hoping that today, tonight, even and after the program, that we think about like places and times that we can show up for ourselves with self-compassion. And so I like the visualization of showing up for yourself like you are your best friend and how you would talk to them. Um, so Kenneth says, I like it. For the dropping situation, Kenneth says, this is a good one. This is a training opportunity to reinforce my service dog skills. Absolutely. That is a training opportunity. And then Kevin says, we can double task a little bit and get both done. And Shelley, thank you for sharing. Shelley says, I'm fairly understanding of my inabilities, but I'm just not happy about them. Absolutely. The other day I was I was talking to a support group for a cancer group because I work with cancer patients in my full-time job. And we were talking about gratitude, and someone came in like after like midpoint near the end of the conversation about gratitude, and so she was sort of caught off a little bit from all the information, and she had said, "I just can't stand that people tell me that I should be grateful that I have the good cancer. There's no good disease, right? There's no good cancer, by the way." Um, And I said, absolutely. I said, you do not have to be grateful or happy or thankful for having disease. And I think it can be actually even more challenging if you can understand your inabilities and understand to that level. But I want you to know that you don't have to be happy about them. And this program and this group will never give you if you want permission to be happy, you can be happy about them, but I will never say that you should be happy about them because they're challenges. But the idea is that we'll give you some tools to kind of help you to kind of reframe a little bit and help to cope within the realities because they're there. And that's the same with the talk I was doing earlier for the cancer group I was working with. And so we don't ever have to be happy or frustrated, or we can be whatever we are in that moment. But at the same time, we can learn that some of the coping skills and some of the tools. I try to put those words together to help us. So we're going to move on to our next slide. I'm going to talk about the science behind it. So here are some of the things. So research really can link self-compassion with lower depression, reduced stress, and greater life satisfaction. It really does make sense in many ways, that if you were able to be compassionate to yourself and kinder to yourself, that you were able to cope a little bit differently. Being compassionate can impact physical health markers as well, because if you are compassionate to yourself, you are going to experience a kinder stress response. So you're going to be able to reduce, you're going to still experience stress, but it's going to be lower stress than if you're not compassionate to yourself. And then with stress is inflammatory. So So there are little things that help do. Will being self-compassionate keep you from getting an MS relapse? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying here either. What I'm saying is that it will help you and help be supported to you. So we're going to move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about how do we recognize negative self-talk? Do you ever find yourself catch yourself when you're not being kind to yourself, I guess? Or catch yourself in a moment that you're frustrated or you're feeling sad or heavy. And because usually when we're talking, when we have negative self-talk, it's going to attach to a moment of feeling high stress or a lot of sadness or a lot of anxiety or a lot of frustration, just a lot of mood changes. So a lot of times negative self-talk will kind of weasel its way in those moments. So maybe I dropped something. I always drop something. Or I'm late to an event. I'm always running late to everything. Or me, for my example, I got lost again. Um, so it's important to know kind of like what feelings and what things trigger that negative self-talk. And because if you know that certain emotions do, you can kind of catch that. Sometimes the negative self-talk is going to happen, and what is important, if we can catch it before it happens, that's amazing. And we can program ourselves like computers and exercise these resilience muscles too, that we can program ourselves to be able to default to some more resilient, self-compassionate type thinking. But we find that we've had a negative self-talk, we can correct it. And so really one of the pieces in doing that is learning that inner critic and learning to identify when that inner critic kind of speaks. And examples of negative self-talk would be, I'm failing. I should be stronger. I should be able to do this. Why can't I handle this? And when we learn to notice our inner critic, what happens is that inner critic is usually automatic and unnoticed. But when we learn to notice it, then we can challenge the inner critic with an inner ally instead. So we'll move on to our next slide. So the inner critic feels shame and discouragement. And sometimes the inner critic is just a natural response. The inner ally encourages, comforts, and motivates you to keep going. So the inner ally is what we're aiming for. We're aiming to be connected with that inner ally, so that way we can have better experiences and talk to ourselves. And we have Kenneth here that says, you show kindness and compassion to others in crisis. Why not yourself? Absolutely. And that's where that friend comment comes. When I say talking to a best friend or talking to a good friend, what would you say to them? Because often we will say something to our friend or to people that we care about, and sometimes we don't give ourselves that same grace and that same regard. And so I like the friend example because it can be an easy trigger. Like, what would I tell a friend? And that trigger can be really helpful for you to kind of think about what you could do. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about catching the critic. So what I would like you to do is to think about, and you can write this if you want, but I've had you kind of write some criticism too. Write down, if you had a piece of paper, or just think about what is a recent negative self-talk, something that you said recently that was not kind to yourself. And this is a good practice to do in the future. So if you find yourself dealing with a negative statement, catch the critic. Write down the negative self-talk. Then I want you to ask yourself, would I say this to a friend? And you practice replacing the critical voice with the kinder voice. And that can be incredibly helpful. But we have to learn to catch it. It's a cognitive switch. We have to learn to switch the way we talk to ourselves and we think. It's very similar to gratitude when I talk about having challenges and you stop and you look at something that you're grateful for. It's that sense of rewiring a little bit that helps to make things a little bit easier. Maria says, prayer helps me with negative self-talk. To accept and move on is the only situation. As I age, I'm less critical of myself. I am retired and have less obligations and avoid creating unnecessary obligations. Identifying this is the trick. And so what Maria is talking about a little bit is balance and boundaries. And we've definitely, for the MS Mental Wellness Chat, we've done a lot of programs on balance and boundaries because they are a critical thing for us to have. So I'm going to ask another question to the group. This is kind of self-compassion in action. What are a simple way that you have shown yourself kindness today? A simple way that you've shown yourself kindness today. Kenneth, he had mentioned that this sounds a little bit like cognitive behavioral therapy, and you're very right. It has some components of that, very much so. Because if we can change how we think or how we respond in our thinking, then we change our actions too. Monique says, I gave in and took a nap. That is a beautiful thing to do, to show yourself kindness today. So if it wasn't today, if life is feeling overwhelming, what's a compassionate response that you can kind of lean on, that you can do? One of the things I did today was two things. We got some more. So Shelley said, I was happy I was able to pick myself up from the ground. So yeah, that's a great thing to be able to look at something positive from that fall. Absolutely. And to know that you had strength to do that, which is great. So I would say, Amelia said, enjoying a walk in this good weather. I am so glad you're enjoying a walk in this good weather too. That's a great thing to show compassion to yourself. For me, one of the things I did for compassion today, very silly thing, but it's a real thing, is I put this headband on because I did not wash my hair this morning and I was tired today. And instead of feeling a lot of pressure, like I have to do a lot to get ready for the program, I put on a headband. And I knew that you guys would accept me as well as I could accept myself. And it was a little time saver and an energy saver by far. But I want you to think about as you're, we can always offer self-compassion and we can be actionable about it. What will we say to a friend? My inner friend said, put a headband on, and everybody is such a good community, it won't even matter. Like little things like that. Like I think those are important. So we'll move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk about embracing self-acceptance. So a lot of what we do in the mental wellness chat too is to embrace and accept where we are in the moment. And this doesn't mean giving up. It just means honoring where you are in the moment. And this could be accepting feelings and emotions. This could also be accepting kind of the limitations, the realities of your body, your situation, your health, etc. And with this, it's important to know that, MS can challenge our identity, and self-acceptance helps you to rebuild it. I could stick to Shelley's example with falling today, or actually I know a couple of other. You guys have been on here for so long. I remember some of your things that you've shared. MS does change how we feel about ourselves sometimes, and we have to readjust and accept. And we don't have to accept it right away. We don't have to like it. We don't have to love it. But we have to work with it because it's what we have. So this is an important comment, important thing to note is that MS will change sometimes some of the things how we feel about ourselves, and as you know, as we have changes, we are in control about how we can work towards acceptance of it, and to be kind to ourselves too. Now, it doesn't mean that that we are giving up. That's not what I'm talking about here. It's working with within the reality of the parameters of whatever the situation is, and being kind to yourself in the process. Um, Barbara said, I had to convince myself to take a day off yesterday from work. It helped me because I was not feeling well and needed some time. Barbara, that's a really great way to be compassionate towards yourself. I've done something very similar before, and it can be really hard to do. But if you talk to yourself as a friend and you realize, this is actually a healthy, good thing for me to do, it can be beneficial. Kenneth says, this is who I am right now. It may not be who I will be tomorrow or yesterday, but right now, this is me. It's a great way to kind of have an acceptance of the situation and where you are in the moment. So there's an exercise, it's called mirror talk. We'll move on to our next slide. So I want you to practice this maybe tonight or tomorrow, maybe tonight as you brush your teeth and get ready for bed. And you may have modifications that you use, so you might not be in front of the bathroom mirror. If not, you can use another mirror, or even use your computer monitor or your phone as a FaceTime or whatever to yourself. But I want you to look at yourself, and I want you to say one kind thing to yourself. And it probably will feel very awkward and uncomfortable. And it doesn't have to be it shouldn't really be focused on looks, but it can be focused on your looks. It can be focused on you as a person, your heart, your body, just you. And practice this. It may feel awkward, but over time, this builds trust and warmth for yourself. And it's probably a really good, nice thing to do as you're either in the morning getting ready or in the evening winding down. I've seen a couple of times, and I think that it's been pretty powerful to do. But I've seen on social media where there will be like a younger girl and maybe her parent, doing her hair, or and she gives her like these affirmations that she says, these affirming statements, and it's really a beautiful thing, but it's kind of practicing that self-talk and that love. So it's called mirror talk. I want you to practice it tonight if you can, and then let me know next month how it went. Very good, Amelia. So Amelia's sharing something from a book that we talked about last month. I believe that Joe had mentioned it, and I had read it, and it's called Atomic Habits. And Amelia had looked into it. She said negativity compounds as does positivity. So that's so true. So both of them are kind of, if you think about it, like how they can double and triple and build up. Like positive things do that, and negative things do that. So it's kind of what we decide to fuel. And sometimes we are programmed to fuel one way, and it might be more of a negative way, but we can slowly change and reprogram how we do that. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness. You can't comfort yourself unless you are aware that you are suffering, that you have challenges. And so that's an important thing. A while back, there was a acronym that I used. It was called STOP, STOP. And it was a body scan activity. And the S stood for literally stopping. The T stood for take a breath. You would breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, just a deep breath. And then the O was to observe kind of how your body was feeling. Were you hungry? Were you tired? Is anything hurting? Are you feeling anxious or stressed? And then the P was about making a plan. What was the next thing that you could do to take care of yourself? So I look at mindfulness as the S and the T, because if you can stop and allow yourself to breathe, to maybe take a couple of breaths. Again, breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. What will happen is that you are going to be able to focus on your breathing. And afterwards, you're going to be able to probably do the O for the stop, which is observe. How am I thinking? How am I feeling right now? And you can't really know how you're feeling if you're not there in the moment. So a simple breath can give you awareness and ground you in the moment. I take a sip of my drink real quick. Okay. So for our next slide, we're going to talk about another exercise. So the first one was the mirror exercise. This one is going to be the mindful pause. So for the mindful pause, you take a moment. I want you to put your hand over your heart, and I want you to breathe. Again, I like the breathing. We breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. It's a yoga breath. Used it in Pilates as well, but it's a good calming breath. And with your hand on your heart and a gentle breath, I want you to ask yourself, what do I need right now? And if you practice this regularly, it will help you, it will help to create a shift instead of being reactive to having a calm presence. And that can be beneficial to you as you're trying to identify too what are the things that you need, and this allows you to just kind of just be calm and identify what things you might need. And let's see, so we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about cultivating self-kindness. So one way to consider this is speaking to yourself as you would as a friend that was in pain. Could be physical pain or emotional pain. Taking a moment to write yourself a letter to yourself during difficult moments. This is one of the things that I've really liked as a activity that you could do today that could be helpful for you tomorrow. And we're going to move on to the next slide, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. So this exercise is called a self-compassion letter. And so essentially what you do is you write yourself a letter acknowledging you're struggling and offer yourself support. And allow yourself to read it when you're facing setbacks, when you're not feeling good, maybe you're having a relapse or you've had a increased amount of symptoms and you're having trouble. Because we know often what we need to hear in those moments. And when you're feeling good is a good time to, or you're feeling okay or stable, is a good time to write it. So that way, if you have a time that you're not feeling good, you have your letter of self-compassion right there ready for you. Now, one of the things that I think too is it's important to know that you're not alone. So we'll move on to our next slide and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So there's a common humanity for us, and that we're not alone. Everyone experiences hardship, and it's a part of being human. It really is, and that's one thing that's really special about this group is that MS may sometimes feel like it isolates you, but in this group that you are not alone in your challenges, and you're not alone in the things that we need to do to move forward with living with MS. Others are often walking in similar paths. For example, how many of you have ever had a fall? And I will say I have had a fall. I wasn't 100% sure if MS was the 100% cause of it, but I know having MS didn't help me at the time. Okay, so Barbara says yes. Kenneth says yes. Shelley says timely question. Shelley, I'm I was hoping for this to connect with you. I know. Kevin says, "Oh my goodness, yes." Katrina says yes. And I think that we'll continue to actually have a couple more yeses come in. So for Shelley especially today, just I want for you to know that many of us have had experience to fall. And Barbara says it's my biggest fear because I have difficulty getting up. And Julie says I haven't fallen in a long time, which is great. Which says you've fallen before, but you haven't fallen in a long time. Kevin said, losing faith in your body is dot, dot, dot. And then Kenneth, which this confused me for a second, but Kenneth said, no more fall, only autumn. I do like that. That's really sweet. And then Tammy says yes. So falling is something that, and not just falling, but experiencing symptoms of MS that you're not alone. That often we in this group especially, we have experiences that we all could probably share that are similar. And connection heals, and that's a big part of this group. So we'll talk go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about how talking with others about MS can reduce shame and increase compassion. And really to consider support groups and online forums like this. You guys are on here today, so I'm so proud of you, and I'm so thankful for you to be here, to show up for yourself on a Friday night for a holiday weekend. I'm elated that we have such good attendance today. This is, to me, it's really incredible. But connection is healing. It doesn't take away the challenge, but being able to connect with someone who understands some aspects really does help. And when you talk with others, this really does reduce shame and it increases compassion. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the role of gratitude, because I don't know what an MS mental wellness chat would be without a conversation about gratitude. So gratitude doesn't deny pain. It doesn't deny the realities that we have, but it shifts the focus on what's still good. And when we practice gratitude regularly, it can enhance resilience, and it can actually help with self-compassion too. So, oh, thank you, thank you. Barbara said, thank you for offering this presentation. It came at a very good time. I'm so thankful that it's coming at a good time for you. And so when we practice gratitude, we're starting to learn to change the script a little bit. That we're to change some of the thinking, and gratitude is generally compassionate because we're looking for things that are good. So I would like to talk a little bit about the role about having like a gratitude or a compassionate journal, and then I'm going to ask you guys a question about gratitude. So when you have we'll move on to our next slide. When you have a gratitude or compassionate journal, you can do this all a little bit different. But if you were starting small, what you could do is each day write down one thing you're grateful for and one way that you were kind to yourself. What a nice thing to capture at the end of the day. My thinking is that before you went to bed tonight, if you thought of what is one thing I'm grateful for and one way I was kind to myself today, you would sleep a little bit better, because when you practice gratitude before bed, what happens is that you are giving yourself some positive neurotransmitters. And because of that, you will have a little bit restful sleep. Now, that's not going to change a sleeping disorder. It's not going to change an anxiety disorder, but it sets you up for a nice way to end the day. And so I'm going to ask you for today, what is one thing that you're grateful for? One small thing that you're grateful for today. And I was really thankful for a conversation with a friend that made me laugh a little bit, but also reminded me that I had something to do. because I almost forgot to do it. So I was so thankful, and that was my gratitude for today. So, what is something that you're grateful for today? And remember, gratitude doesn't, it really should be the small little things that happen in your day, not the big amazing things, because those big amazing things are not things that happen all the time. Thank you. Barbara said the presentation today, Barbara. Thank you so very much. Kenneth says the cooler weather. Yeah, absolutely. Shelley says, I'm grateful for this webinar. I needed community today. I'm so thankful that you are here with us, Shelley, today. So we have little good things that happen every day, and they're all around us. It's just our job to see them or to notice them. And so I want to challenge you to think about tonight before you go to bed. What is one thing I'm grateful for, and what is one way that I was kind to myself? And also know that being kind to yourself doesn't have to be fancy. It can be, I was kind to myself because I brushed my teeth before bed tonight, or I was kind to myself when I put a load of laundry in the washer, or so it doesn't, or I was kind to myself when I ate a good meal today. um Julie said, oh, I'm sorry, Maria says, I made a friend feel better about a difficult topic, which is incredible. And she's grateful for that. And then Julie says, I'm grateful to my air conditioner for working, because yesterday my power went off. Oh my goodness. So I bet you are thankful for your air conditioning. And then Amelia says, yes, the good weather, and grateful for this chat. And then Joe says, I'm grateful for someone's birthday so I could have cake. And then Kevin says, I'm grateful I got a call into my retirement accounts manager. Learned so much. And then Katrina says, I made it through the week. We have lots of things to be grateful for, which is awesome. I'm glad. I've noticed over time it's easier and easier for people to do. But life is hard. So sometimes, being able to do this is not easy. So we're going to talk next about how self-compassion can help us during MS flare-ups, or even just symptom flare-ups. So it doesn't have to be a big relapse, but just, we can say a pseudo relapse where, symptoms flare essentially. So during, times where symptoms are higher, self-compassion can reduce fear and the sense of helplessness. When you're using calm words like resting without guilt, asking help when needed, this can help you to be able to program more compassion for yourself. So when you're during a period of time of extended symptoms, making sure that you are using calming words, that you're allowing yourself to rest without feeling guilty. That's a hard one for me sometimes. And asking for help when needed. Also, with managing expectations, we'll move on to our next slide. So when we're practicing self-compassion, this helps us to manage expectations. You may not be able to do everything you once could. I know that's the case for me today, 20 years into my own disease. But self-compassion allows you to reset expectations without shame, because that inner critic, that negative talk, often is causing shame. And so let's develop a compassion plan. So we'll move on to our next slide. And I want to remind you, I've learned that it's easier for me to do the presentations. So when it's like kind of like just one, long word, or a couple words to kind of help prompt me. But these presentations are recorded, and they are found on the MS Views and News YouTube channel. So you have the ability to access them. It usually takes a couple weeks for them to get uploaded, but there is a whole playlist of these mental wellness chats, so you can go to them. And so if I say something that really stood out to you, or that you think that you remember from the chat, this is where you need to go. Go to the YouTube channel for MS Views and News, and go to the MS Mental Wellness Chat playlist, and go there. Kevin said, I never expected a mental health webinar today. It's such a wonderful way to wrap up the week. I agree completely. So we're going to talk about how to develop a compassion plan. So go back one more. Power slide, if you don't mind. Perfect. So I want you to build, to think of like go-to phrases, calming activities, and support resources. Keep a compassion kit for tough days. So this might be maybe it's a little maybe it's just a piece of paper that you put that you fold and make a little grid out of. And what are some notes and things that you would like to tell yourself? Compassionate statements. When I was practicing therapy full time, what I would have people do sometimes is put compassionate statements around their house, like in places that they would go to. Like, so if they were very critical about themselves when they were eating or going to the fridge, that they had nice statements, that things that helped to kind of repair some of that talk. If they were had difficulty in the mirror, or if they just spent time in the mirror in the morning brushing their teeth, that was a good place to do that. But if you could think about having a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper that you have the things that you that help you feel better when you need them. So like a list of activities that calm you, affirmations or go-to phrases, and people that support you, or songs that you like, or quotes. I love quotes, so that would be something that I would have. And tools, things that you've learned in the mental wellness chat, that could be helpful. So I want you to think about those things. The next thing we're going to talk about, so you can have a compassion kit or a compassion piece of paper. It doesn't have to be a kit. So we're going to talk a little bit about reframing setbacks. Setbacks are really hard, and in MS, it feels like setbacks can happen a little bit. And life setbacks can happen as well. And that inner critic can really come out sometimes during a setback. So I want to remind you that a setback is not a personal failure. And a tip or way you can talk to yourself is during the setback is, this is hard and I'm doing my best. But finding statements, you know, and if you have a compassion kit, when you have you know, a setback, especially a reframing setback, because sometimes you can make a lot of progress in practicing gratitude and cognitive reframing and positive thinking and stuff, and then life happens, something hard, and then it's tough. It's like, whoa, I'm kind of deviating to what I was doing before. Just kind of starting with, this is hard. I'm doing my best. And then maybe follow up, what would I tell my friend? So we're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk about compassionate boundaries. This is important, and this was mentioned, I believe, by Maria. I'm not sure, but I believe by Maria. Say no to what drains you. Say yes to what nourishes you. And boundaries are an act of kindness to yourself and to other people. And we'll move on to our next slide because I know we won't have so much time left. I wish I could keep talking for a long time. We're going to talk about practicing self-compassion in daily life. So self-compassion is not just for hard times. It's really for every day. And build in a small routine. I do like the mornings or the evenings, like when you're brushing your teeth. That's a good time to sort of think. But to have gentle self-talk, to have, you know, rest breaks, or to have joyful moments, to look at and celebrate joyful moments. And I'm going to read a little bit. So we have someone who has a really great idea. I can tell. Kenneth says, write kind notes, put them in a jar, and pull one out when you need to read them. Very good. Actually, and I will share this. We'll do this one together. So I got this little box of, it's like little fortunes, but it actually is really nice self-compassionate statements. And so I bought it at an airport recently when I was traveling. So so I'm going to open one up, but this is just an idea, you know, but it's like a deviation of what Kevin just said, and we can share this together. So let's see. Okay, so at this moment, right now, you are bigger than you doubt. You're more special than you doubt. At this moment, you are more than you might even think. So you can always get a book or do a jar, put them, do them for yourself, print things out. But that is for us today. Shelley says, I always remind myself that what I have in life is life challenging, but not life threatening. Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to move on to our next slide. And so this is just a pause or reflection. Who do you want to be to yourself? You don't have to answer this in the question box. Are you your worst critic or are you your strongest supporter? And reflect on how you can shift that relationship if you are your worst critic. Often we are our worst critics. And how we can we position ourselves to be more of the strongest supporter. And we're going to move 2 slides forward. One more slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about that self-compassion is a skill and it grows as you practice. So think about this as any exercise that you do. Mental exercises are just like physical exercises. It takes time and practice and and trying. And that book Atomic Habits, one of the things I really like is that it says something about doing one small thing that gets you closer to how you want to be, and so small steps can make big changes. And to know that self-compassion, it is a skill, so it is something you can obtain. Self-compassion can help reduce suffering and improves your physical and your mental health. And you deserve your own kindness. Often we give away our kindness to other people so easily, but we don't give ourselves that kindness, and we deserve the kindness that we give others. So you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserves your love and affection. That's from Buddha. Thank you to Viatris for their support, and always thank you to MS News and News for letting us have this mental wellness chat. It has been such a great community for such a long time, and we'll move on. And again, this is not a goodbye. This is I'll see you later, but I want you to know that you showed up for yourself tonight. You've been a part of an incredible community. We will be here next month, so we're not saying goodbye. We're going to say we'll see you later. All right, take care. Have a good evening.